Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Nations are falling short on climate change commitments. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Tuesday, 25th April 2023. Details when we return.
Hubbard's Multi-Department Mount Gay and Hubbard's Tire Bay, located at the Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, are reminding the motoring public that another round for licensing and inspection has begun. Just arrived on new shipments of quality furrowed and torque tires to fit all makes and models of vehicles at competitive pricing. Shop early to avoid the hassle of long lines. WhatsApp them on 473-405-5482. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
Welcome back. A director of the Climate Change Analytics Caribbean, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has indicated that many nations have fallen short on their commitments to lower and mitigate their carbon footprints. TTT's Terry-Ann Brown-Campbell has details in this report.
The latest assessment report of the Paris Agreement's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is very sobering. This is the way Director of Climate Analytics Caribbean, Rowana Haynes, described the report.
According to the IPCC, we have two gaps. We have a gap in terms of what countries have said they will do in the context of their nationally determined contributions. Those actions that have been communicated fall drastically short in every way.
She noted the second gap is in implementation of those national contributions.
We are very much off track in terms of being able to limit global warming to within 1.5 degrees Celsius. In fact, we are on track for warming of about 3 degrees Celsius. In a best case scenario, if we can address the implementation gap, if countries even did what they said they were going to do, we could get it down to 2.7 degrees Celsius. But this in itself is still a disaster.
Ms. Haynes outlined the effect of this rise in temperature on the planet.
It will trigger events that we cannot reverse, such as sea level rise. We will continue to lose coastlines. It will change life as we know it on the planet. And this is at 1.5 degrees Celsius. At 2 degrees Celsius, it is a virtual certainty that we will lose all coral reefs globally.
The Climate Analytics Caribbean Director made her comments at the organization's Islands All In launch on Friday. Terry-Ann Brown-Campbell, TTT News.
Should CARICOM's regional war on violent crime prompt member states like Trinidad and Tobago to make the Caribbean Court of Justice the final court of appeal for criminal matters? TV6's political editor Jewel Brown posed this question to Chief Justice Ivor Archie at CARICOM's recent symposium on crime as a public health issue.
TV6 News sought the perspective of Chief Justice Ivor Archie about the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, in the context of the regional approach CARICOM heads of government were examining during their deliberations earlier this week at CARICOM's symposium on crime as a public health issue. We did so as Chief Justice Archie spoke with journalists off camera after the opening ceremony of the symposium, which took place at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Port of Spain. There's one element of it that the CCJ deals with trade matters, but in terms of things like, murder cases, for example, the highest court of appeal in Trinidad and Tobago is still the Privy Council. Should that really be now a situation of creating that impetus that when you have, let's say, criminal matters of a specific nature especially, all of the CARICOM states should have the CCJ as their final court of appeal?
Well, I have been on record as being in support of the Caribbean Court of Justice as a final appellate court. So I have no difficulty in supporting that proposition.
The Caribbean Court of Justice is located in Port of Spain. The CCJ explains on its website that in its appellate jurisdiction, it hears appeals from lower courts in both civil and criminal matters from states which have replaced the Privy Council with the CCJ, and that in its appellate jurisdiction, the CCJ is the highest municipal court in the region. According to the CCJ's website, so far, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, and Guyana have made it the final court of appeal.
I think from a practical standpoint as well, having a Caribbean Court of Justice located right here in Trinidad really provides greater access to justice for our citizens. And I would imagine if we manage it properly, quicker turnaround time as well for appeals. There's also the philosophical question of repatriating our jurisprudence and having a court that lives in and understands the societies which it judges.
The Chief Justice also responded to a question about concerns raised by CARICOM heads during the symposium about the issue of familiarity between judges and criminal lawyers within the Caribbean community.
Judges would have been lawyers and would have had professional relationships, even friendships, sometimes with lawyers with whom they may have gone to school. One cannot just simply not talk to someone who you know. But my experience over 25 years as a judge is that people know where to draw the lines in terms of what they discuss. Most of us as judges are careful about how we socialize.
But the Chief Justice then made reference to a particular category of lawyers.
I think it's a little more challenging when our colleagues who are attorneys are also politicians. Right. I think that enters a different realm where one has to be cautious, not so much about any real undue influence, but about the perception in some areas of the population who do not understand that as professional colleagues you can speak and socialize, but not necessarily be compromised in the independent exercise of your duties.
Jule Brown, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. CCJ backs Bahamas justice system in light of two criticisms leveled against judges who give bail to people on murder charges. More in this ZNS News item.
In the face of charges, two regional prime ministers have leveled against this country's criminal justice system come serious backing from the Trinidad-based Caribbean Court of Justice. During a round-table discussion at a CARICOM symposium in Trinidad and Tobago to address crime and violence as a public health issue earlier this week, St. Vincent and the Grenadines leader, the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves, openly chided judges in the Bahamas for granting bail to alleged murderers, going as far as to question if they live on Mars. The view is one shared by Barbados Prime Minister the Honorable Mia Mottley. But Justice Jacob Witt of the Caribbean Court of Justice takes a different stance, a perspective he expressed during the very same two-day summit that counted Prime Minister the Honorable Philip Davis, Police Commissioner Clayton Fernander, and National Security Minister the Honorable Wayne Munro as participants.
He began by denying charges leveled by regional prime ministers on Monday. He denied all of them by Motley and by Gonsalves, that certain judges seem to live on the planet Mars based on their judgment. As he retorted, the highest appellate judges of some Caribbean countries live in the UK. Witt said the CCJ will protect people's human rights despite critics arguing it would not. He said a British academic visiting Guyana this week said people's rights were better protected at the CCJ than at the Privy Council. Witt said constitutions of many countries in the region, excluding Trinidad and Tobago, mandated the trials must be fair for all parties concerned. The trial should be fair for all, defendant, victims, witnesses, and society as a whole.
In his address to the regional symposium Monday, Prime Minister Davis acknowledged that the need to reduce violent crime has never been more urgent, as each year hundreds of lives are at stake and many more affected by the resulting trauma. In 2022, the Bahamas recorded a high of 128 homicides. Commissioner Fernander has said that 35 of the suspects that year were on bail. A bit of reprieve comes in knowing the country's solvency rate, particularly when compared with that of TNT.
for all of the talk about what is happening on crime, the detection rate in Trinidad and Tobago is 20% compared to 70+% in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So let us not try to fool the Bahamian people. Further, out of those few detected murders, there was an acquittal rate of 60 to 70%, equating to a conviction rate as low as 30%.
CARICOM has declared a war on guns, starting with the decision to ban automatic rifles across the region. This was one of the outcomes of the two-day symposium in Trinidad and Tobago, which explored crime as a public health issue in the region. Zane Romulus of DBS News World reports.
Following the two-day symposium, the CARICOM have agreed to a 15-point plan to deal with crime. At the symposium, where crime and violence was addressed as a public health issue, the leaders registered their grave concern at the increase in the illegal exportation of guns from the U.S., considering it a direct threat to the democracy of regional territories.
We did not produce guns in any of the islands, and it's proven that most of the guns come from outside.
If we do nothing, then nothing will happen. If we accept the situation as it is, then the realistic outcome is that guns will continue to flow. It is by starting an action, it is by putting the situation to the United States, whether through legal channels, diplomatic channels, bilateral channels, by joining together as we have done to bring attention to the problem.
In the declaration, the regional leaders called on the United States to join the Caribbean in the war on guns and to urgently take action to stop the illegal exportation of firearms and ammunition into the region.
It cannot be that we fought and are still fighting and still being hurt by the drug war and the drug traffic and the drug trade because that was of interest to the United States population. And now that guns and ammunition are destroying and threatening to destroy our own sovereignty and our total societal arrangements, that is of no interest to the American population. Cannot be.
Regional leaders lamented the disproportionate share of their national budgets, which they say they are compelled to allocate to measures to address crime, violence, and national security, as well as mental health and other health-related challenges that directly result from the illegal exportation of guns to the region. The leaders said that the Caribbean must be a zone of peace and underscored their commitment to utilizing all human, financial, and other resources to rid the region of the scourge of illicit weapons. For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
In other news, a call from the Pan American Health Organization director to step up routine vaccination programs as the risk for disease breakouts in the region hit a 30-year high due to a decline in vaccination coverage. Tiana Cole of HGP Nightly News has more.
While the Americas was the first region in the world to eliminate polio in 1994 and has historically been a world leader in disease control and elimination, national immunization programs have suffered numerous setbacks over the last decade. Dr. Jarbas Barbosa said that inadequate sustainable financing for immunization and increase in vaccine hesitancy due to misinformation have been among the primary drivers of the drop in coverage. Pahu said the region of the Americas is the second in the world with the worst vaccine coverage and that an estimated 2.7 million children did not receive all their vaccine doses in 2021, leaving them without full protection against diphtheria, tetanus, and whooping cough. It said two countries, Brazil and Mexico, account for more than 50% of children that have never received vaccine in the region. Failure to effectively implement and maintain routine vaccination coverage leaves children susceptible to diseases such as polio, tetanus, measles, and diphtheria, Dr. Boza warned.
Tiana Cole again tells us at Suriname reintroduced visa requirements for 21 countries less than a year after abolishing it for all countries.
Less than a year after Suriname abolished the visa requirements for all countries, the measure is being reintroduced for 21 countries, From May 1, the visa requirement will apply to 21 countries whose citizens have been found to be abusing visa-free travel to Suriname. According to Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation, Albert Ramdin, they include the Caribbean nations of the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Venezuela. Other countries include India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Kenya, Ghana, Somalia, Cameroon, Ethiopia, and Syria. The decision to reintroduce the requirement was taken on Wednesday. Although there has always been an increase in arrivals from China, Morocco, Romania, and Colombia, the visa requirement for citizens of those countries has not been reinstated. Ramdin explained that when the government introduced visa-free travel on July 1 last year, the goal was to get as many tourists as possible to Suriname and to make the country more accessible to foreign investors. However, he said an evaluation was done and it was found, among other things, that travelers were using Suriname as a stopover.
Hubbards is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.